My name's Gabriel, and I've been in the credit repair or credit solutions business for about 15 years. I got in as a result of having credit challenges myself. I had about 49 negative notations, about $242,000 in debt, and I needed my credit at that time. I had a little girl, and I wanted to take care of her and my mother. So after repairing my credit, I decided that I didn't want to just use credit for debt, creation of debt, or the creation of liabilities. I wanted to create legacy. I wanted to use my credit to invest. And I got my scores up to about an 816, and I thought that I should qualify for high limit credit cards, lines of credit, letters of credit. I even wanted to use Series LLC to buy property. And I was running into all kind of pushback from the banks. So I started studying some of the nuances of why certain people got higher approvals than others. And in keeping a dossier of these notes that I was learning on the fly, I realized that there were some black box reports that banks were using that were unbeknownst to me and the general public. For instance, FICO, before it was known, you would hear banks say your credit score is too low to approve you for the loan, but they wouldn't tell you what the score was, and they wouldn't tell you who generated the score. They would tell you to go to the credit bureau and find out. And after a lawsuit, FICO had to go public and explain some of the characteristics of a FICO score, and that's why we now have what we call a pie chart, a FICO pie chart. And it has some percentages of what your scores are made up of. Like 35% of your score is the payment history, 30% of your score is the amount of credit used, and then there's a few other variables. So after learning the nuances of the score, I still was finding that I was being pushed back from getting approved for big lines of credit. So I could get as many credit cards as I wanted. I kind of cracked that, that code. I have here about 49 credit cards. I have 2 Blackcards. I have every prestigious credit card you can name in this stack.
Wow.
This is almost $1 million in credit cards. I carry it with me because it's a marketing tool. If I pay for a cup of coffee and I pull out all these credit cards, people want to know, why do you have that many cards? And so it's kind of a marketing tool. But it also reminds me that there was a long process just to get here. So how did I find out what it would take to get lines of credit? To walk into the bank as an individual and say, I want a line of credit because I want to open a business. Many people want credit for those reasons. I discovered that there is a new set of files, consumer files, quite like a private investigator would keep a file on someone. That's called a consumer file. Or quite like the FBI would keep a file on someone. That's called a consumer file. Well, I thought that all of the data that I need to focus on was on credit reports, right? Because that's what you focus on when you want credit. Well, once I had perfect credit, I knew that it wasn't the credit report that was holding me back. It was something else. So I started reviewing the consumer reports. That was the only other report I knew. Credit reports are something that creditors use. Consumer reports are something that consumers use. So because I have thousands of clients over the last 13 years, I had a stockpile of consumer reports that I could review. So I started putting side by side consumers with the same profile, same age, same education, from the same cities. I found 2 individuals that had graduated from the same college, had received a job from the same employer, made the same amount of money, and they were in my office trying to build their credit and expand their credit. And I sent them both to the same bank because I have a credit rebuilder component in our credit repair program. And so I could keep a record of who would get approved for high limits and who would get approved for low limits. So I sent these 2 kids, I call them Brian and Brad, and Brad had a $500 approval and Brian had a $1,500 approval. So I looked at their consumer reports to figure out why. I found something interesting in the soft inquiry section of these reports. The soft inquiries are where banks are actually pursuing you. they like you meet their underwriting guidelines, and they request information about you, and the creditors have, or the credit bureaus have to put that data into the soft inquiry section of your report because they have to keep a record of it. But if you're not looking at consumer reports, because we're in a digital age, everyone's looking at things online, right? Electronically. So you would overlook that because you don't have the report. So I started keeping a dossier on all these interesting companies that I didn't know of before that were found in the soft inquiry section, such as Innovis, Advanced Resolution Solutions, SageStream, LexisNexis, Check Systems. These were all consumer files that were actually pulling or scraping information from your credit reports, keeping a dossier for you, and then creditors, or clients I should say, such as banks and financial institutions, were utilizing these services, these files, to get more data about you than what they could find on your credit report. Then the credit bureaus got involved with this, and they started creating payroll companies for themselves so they could buy your payroll data and find in real time what you really make, and then share that information with banks about you, instead of the banks taking your honest opinion on your credit app and what you make, right? I then, once I figured out that these consumer files were the actual culprits in keeping me from getting higher approvals, I started freezing these reports. And very interesting things started happening. I started getting pre-approval letters. I started getting transfer balance letters. I started getting limit increases automatically without asking. And I noticed that. So I found one report that was the real culprit for most of us, the reason why many of us can't borrow large amounts of money, lines of credit. And this is a banking activity report. And this is a report that I didn't think a creditor could get access to without me giving them the right to review my bank account, right? Well, all the companies that I was applying for lines of credit with and high credit card limits with were on this report in the inquiry section. Now, this is a consumer file. So my bank was sharing my banking activity with other banks that I was applying for credit cards, car loans, lines of credit. And when I found it, it was shocking for me. So I decided to ask the banks about it. And they act like they didn't know anything about it. So I would go to the bank and show it to them. And no one was aware of this report that worked in the banks. Some of this information I'm sharing with you, people that are actually working in banking aren't familiar with it. They have no clue of how it works. So I want you to understand that there's another score out there that's called the Wealth score. You have the credit score, and then you have the Wealth score. What does credit score sound like? Sounds like something that just gives you some credit to create debt or to secure liabilities or to cushion you and your paycheck. So you have a little extra to use outside of your paycheck. But the Wealth score is actually what's used to help you generate legacy, not liability. It's what you're using to invest. So the investments now pay you passive income. So I've written a book. It's called The Wealth Score Expert. And I've detailed some of the information that I've said here in this book. And it's available in the stores. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to my website. It's called wealthscores.com. Wealthscores.com. And I also have some free books here that I want to give you that will teach you how to do credit repair yourself. And if you like them, I'll leave these up here. You can collect them for yourselves. And if you have any questions, I'll take them at this moment.
Awesome.
Any questions?
I'm interested in those reports, shutting those reports
I
down.
was going to say that. Yeah, that's the key.
That's what I'm.
Well, that's a part of the service that I offer.
Mhm.
I actually freeze the reports for you. And what it does is it makes the banks honest again, where they're now only reviewing the data that you give them, and they're reviewing the data that's regulated by the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. The challenge is the consumer files are unregulated data. It's quite like me scraping the internet about data on you from your social media sites. I can do that and it not be against the law.
Right.
But because these consumer files are up and coming and there's so many, when we find them out, they just create a new one. And what happens is our consumer file that's found out to be used heavily by banks eventually becomes a credit bureau. So Innovis was a consumer file, and then it was found out that it was heavily utilized by banks, and it became a credit bureau. SageStream was a consumer file, now it's a credit bureau. Advanced Resolution Solutions is a credit bureau. Okay, so there's more than Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
Right.
And so if you're only consulting the big three credit bureaus, even that is not enough credit repair. We do check systems, SafeRent, LexisNexis. We do a lot of under the radar files in our credit repair.
Files.
Yes. All right. Thank you for your time.